Hey guys, before we get into today's episode, I just have two announcements. We just launched a brand new event called the Directors Retreat. It's for heads of SBA 7A divisions. The event will take place in Savannah, Georgia, May 4th and 5th. If you want your shop to innovate, have the best culture, and be at the forefront of SBA lending, send this to your SBA director. We'll leave a link in the show notes below. Also, just a reminder, we recently launched a jobs board on the Art of SBA website to connect SBA lending professionals with their next big challenge. If you want to post your open position or check out some of the jobs, go to artofsba.com. We'll leave a link in the show notes for that as well. All right, now on with the episode. This week on the Art of SBA Lending. This is like the best stuff I've ever heard.
I always see the salesperson wants to close based on hope, and everybody else wants to close based on facts.
How do we train ourselves up front better? How do we wait to get emotionally attached to a deal later in the process?
Well, I spoke to a recruiter on my podcast like maybe 6 months ago, and I was just asking, what are reasons underwriters, are leaving? And one of the common reasons was because the BDOs were jerks. Lumos gets brought up on just about every episode these days because they are changing the way SBA loans are underwritten, especially small loans. So I wanted to take a second to explain the power of Lumos. So here's how it works. Lumos' scoring model, Prime Plus, leverages over 1 billion data points to come up with a predicted expected loss. So now you can quickly and efficiently decision each new loan request. Guys, we're talking about auto decisioning on small loans up to $500,000. They'll even sit down with you to build out a customized credit profile that matches the risk tolerance of your specific institution. Lumos is defining the next chapter of SBA lending, and it couldn't be coming at a better time with the rise of the small loan program. By the way, you can use Lumos to score your existing portfolio too, so that you can see where the weak spots are before there's a problem, and that way you know where to focus your resources. Let Lumos take your small business lending to the next level with cutting-edge analytics by going to lumosdata.com and scheduling your demo today. Hello, and thank you for tuning into the Art of SBA Lending podcast. This is going to be a part of a two-part episode that we're doing, which features up-and-coming leaders in the SBA space. I have a panel of some really bright and talented folks with me today. So we're going to just kind of jump into it. I just want to kind of go around and do some introductions. So Jane, I'm going to start with you because we had worked together at our last company. So just tell us a little bit about how you kind of got into SBA and what you've been up to since.
Oh gosh. So how I came into SBA is, I think, the way that a lot of people got into SBA by accident. It's not like anybody told me about the program or anything like that. I was actually going to SDSU at the time and also working in the nonprofit sector. And after correcting a formula with a larger nonprofit that we ran a campaign with and getting some back due contributions for the nonprofit that I worked for, a board member of that nonprofit recruited me into commercial banking. So my first credit analyst job was in the SBA space. And so I actually learned about the program and the nuances of the program a little bit by chance. The reason why I stayed, though, is for me, SBA's complexity and the requirement to have to write and understand and sell and help through two separate policies, the internal one as well as the SBA SOP, and also the reward of helping small businesses is why I ended up staying. For better or worse, no deal is the same as the next or the last. So SBA will always keep you young and thinking.
Keeps it fresh. Yeah, absolutely.
It does. Fighting Alzheimer's every day.
So what track have you gone down in SBA? Credit, sales, ops?
So I actually started in credit, and even moonlit in some other areas of banking and other sectors. But if you just follow specifically the SBA stuff, I started into credit, floated into relationship management and portfolio management, at the shop that we worked together because we were winding down operations. I actually got the opportunity to do a little bit of everything once we got down to 6 people.
Wow, you're in the final 6.
Yeah, exactly. So, but that's small shops. At small shops, you don't have the limitation of just knowing your part. You get really familiar with everything, start to finish, from collecting the documentation and even pre-screening deals through origination, closing, post-closing, servicing, and even now for myself, this is the first time that I've gone through the process of requesting the guarantee to be honored and fighting through that process to get that guarantee honored. So,
Well, it's incredible, and yeah, of course, the wind down, of our last shop. That's gonna be, for our Patreon channel. We could tell that story, but have you found your next thing yet?
talking to a lot of people, and there's a lot of interesting things that are going on that I think that through the course of conversation, I think will come up based on some of our prep
Excellent.
questions. But
So you're in transition right here as you
I'm
record
in,
this.
yeah, exactly. I am nearly free agent. I'm fully committed, for myself. If I commit to something, I'm committed to something. And I've committed to the team and the leadership there and even our parent company to get what needs to be done and to fulfill on the promises of any sort of contracts that we have pending out there. So I'm in for till the bitter end.
Wow. Well, I was out. I was the first one off the ship, I think, or like the fourth person. Not by choice, but but that's incredible. We worked together from an underwriting capacity role. You were an underwriter. I was very impressed by you, your communication skills, your leadership skills. So I
Thank
could see
you.
you as someone who could, I don't know what you want to do, but whether it's a chief credit officer or an operations manager or servicing or portfolio, running a shop even one day, I think that's all in your future. So it's up to what you want. And, that's why you're here. And that's why everyone's here. And, I'm going to go to Molly next. And Molly, you're someone that I met at Nagel, and I saw you
Yep.
actually, you've been participating. I think you graduated from the future
Future
leader, lender, whatever.
leading lenders. I have it on my desk here to reference. I never know what leader comes first, but yeah, that was a great program. Just got a little bit more networking than I would have outside of it, and learned some things from the Capitol Hill aspect of SBA and technical writing, that kind of thing. So it was a really, really great program.
Interesting. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about, how you got into SBA and what your background has been in.
Yeah, so much like Jane, it was pretty serendipitous. I had been working for a bank, very, very large bank, for about, I want to say 13 years. Yeah, 13 years. And in those 13 years, I just was one of those that I'm going to apply here and I'm going to get this job, and then I'm going to become a subject matter expert, and then I'm going to go on to the next one. And so about every year and a half, I was moving on. And a friend of mine reached out and asked if I wanted to apply for an SBA position in closing. And I said, sure, why not? And just kind of thinking to myself, barely knowing how to spell SBA, that maybe in a year, maybe year and a half, I'll move on. Yeah, I'm still with SBA Lending. I was with that bank doing SBA for 7 years before I left. And now I'm on my 12th year, going on my 12th year in SBA. Pretty much the whole time has been the closing aspect. So I've been a closer and team lead and a closing manager. I recently switched from closing manager to risk compliance manager. I love writing procedures and I love testing systems, and it's so much fun for me. And not many people have that, I guess. But mainly, I'm just doing file reviews before closing, after closing, helping with audits, making sure that our procedures and policies are up to date, making sure when we do what we do, we have a policy in our bank policy that says exactly how we handle that situation. So it's been great. It's been fun.
Incredible how much goes into this. But I just think you're someone who has the right temperament, to be in this space, because it's you need to be such a dynamic person to be successful and to be a leader in our space. So, I was just drawn to you and wanted you here and your voice to be heard in this discussion, because I think you're, same thing with Jane, like one of our brightest people in the industry. So thank you for being here. And, I'm saving the best for last. And of course, it's my new credit director, so I'm going to have to butter him up a little bit here. But Rob Parkin, joined us, here at True Liant. What's it been now, Rob? 2 months?
2 months, yeah.
All right. And he's still here. So far, so good. Tell us a little bit about your background and welcome to the pod.
Thanks. It's great to be here. I have been in the SBA world for about 8 years. I started at a really big SBA lender out here in Utah. I've worked for some of the bigger regional banks out here. I fell into SBA again, kind of like everyone else, by chance, and have really just grown to really like it and enjoy it. I wanted to get out of SBA lending for a long, long time. I just thought it was maybe too complicated and too complex. When you first read the SOP, you think you don't know English at all or anything about lending. And then you start to just roll over these deals and you start to learn it little by little. And along the way, you start to realize the knowledge that we have in the SBA world is the best cocktail party conversations, because we know how to help these people fund their ideas in a way that where they don't have to go get butchered by VCs and PE firms. And I think that's the coolest thing about this industry, is how we can use debt financing to help people really fund their ideas. And it just gives us so much to talk about. And we have so much knowledge about helping people find their passions and find their joy. So that's what's kept me in the SBA world. And I've just enjoyed everything of making switches from where I was to where I am now, because you start to understand that credit is spelled a little bit different at every single shop. And I think that has been a really cool thing too, is to understand how credit is different between different lenders and how you learn how to mitigate risk in different ways that if you stayed at one lender, you'd never learn different ways on how to mitigate.
Absolutely. Wow. So between all of us, we have a lot of bases. We could probably do a whole SBA loan with the 4 of us, which is great. I'll
I'm
have hired it.
Yeah,
We can underwrite it, close it, service it. So
Mhm.
totally.
A lot better than others, mind you.
yes, would you like to name any names, Molly?
No, I would
okay.
like to, but
Not a
So-
phrase source, Ray.
yeah.
That's again for the Patreon, but cool. So we're going to be covering a lot of different stuff in this conversation. I mean, we'll see where it goes, but we want to talk about some of the current events going on. We want to talk about the future of the program, just what we're seeing on a day-to-day basis. But first I want to ask you guys, like, as an employee in the SBA space, a lot of folks start out as, an underwriter, a closer, etc. And some of them want to move up the ranks and become managers and leaders in the space like you guys have become. And I'm just curious, like, what are the challenges that you've had to face? I'll just go to Jane with this, but like, as you're trying to, progress in your career.
I would say this is something that's common for a lot of people, even just in lending period, not necessarily SBA. It's the bottleneck that has historically been present. I actually think this bottleneck will get a little bit tighter as technology enhances the process. Just take my experience specifically. I started in as a credit analyst. The next logical place for me to be was a credit underwriter. I made my way through there. Even at a small shop, you maybe have 5 to 10 underwriters at a given time to 1, maybe 2 credit managers or sort of like team leads. And then that filters up to a chief credit officer. So like there's this huge bottleneck if you follow the supposed to path. So I know, of course, learning all the different processes, especially if you come from a larger bank where you only knew your piece. I know a lot of people that were a closer and then they were a credit analyst. They actually took on each job role at different shops to learn kind of what you're forced to learn when you're at a smaller shop. But it's like, where do you go next when you go from the pool of 10 people up to maybe 1 or 2, which is maybe maybe a credit person goes into being a credit manager. Maybe they attempt to go into sales. We have a mutual friend that has just made that shift from being sort of more support and operations and credit and moving into sales.
Yes, God bless him.
God bless him, and I think that, really great sales guys, sales people edit that.
Well, yeah,
Really
speaking,
great.
it's funny. It's funny you
Go
say
ahead.
that because do you know who our top producer this was at our company? Before we get into the episode, I want to tell you a quick story. I was at the BDO retreat earlier this year, sitting next to Dustin Baker and one of the Shatterbox learners that he had recruited into the SBA industry. Her name is Sarah. And Sarah told me that she closed $10 million in her first 6 months as a BDO. I look over at Dustin and I asked him, why would anyone hire an $8 to $12 million producer anymore? Sarah is one of many Shatterbox learners who has proven that you can take a smart young person with no SBA experience, teach them SBA, and in many cases, they will outproduce seasoned BDOs right out of the gate. Why are we still willing to hire a mediocre BDO with a 6-figure salary when you can hire your next rock star, someone with unlimited potential, for half the price? You have no more excuse. Shatterbox has created the best learning platform ever created for the SBA lending industry. Join the 20 plus Shatterbox clients who have already taken the plunge on building talent from the ground up. I'm going to leave a link down below just for Art of SBA listeners. So if you want to learn how Shatterbox can help you hire and invest in bright young talent without breaking the bank, reach out and set up a discovery call today.
I'm going to bet my girl Mary.
Mary took home the trophy out of, I think there's 8 or 9 BDOs, only female, and she had a baby in June.
Right.
And she just came on board in May, and some people were there before. So incredible. So yeah, so salespeople.
She's a great example of a salesperson understanding credit and wanting to understand credit and sort of preempting credit thoughts during the pre-screen process. I would say she and I had a pretty large deal that was very complex, and she had great questions throughout the underwriting process. And I think that any salesperson that is open to asking why and sort of collaborating with their underwriters so that they can learn things and then apply that knowledge to their next deal is only going to strengthen their ability to identify good deals early, get no said quickly, and invest their time on what they really should be investing their time on.
If you're an underwriter and you're trying to progress, what you're basically saying is like, well, if the traditional path is, your credit manager, so, out of 5 underwriters, and if they all want to be credit manager, like that's not going to work, right? So like,
you're going to have to change where you're at or settle or you do go into portfolio management, right? And I think that historically servicing and portfolio management is not the, or can we say sexy? Is that
Sexy?
too much?
Yeah.
It's not
we can
like,
say that. We can say that
right.
here.
It's not the sexiest of positions out there. At least that's the way that it's sold to you, right? And then even more so special assets. Like that's definitely not the job that people
It's getting
are.
sexier.
It's getting interesting, but that isn't the role that people dream about, or at least that's not what they think. I think that but I think portfolio management is sort of the unsung hero, right? Especially right now
I agree.
as we see defaults increasing right now.
We need to make it sexier and attract more people to it. And
And it's beyond just collecting insurance certificates and financials. It really is risk assessment. It's collaborating with your credit to say like, hey, I'm seeing increased risk in these areas beyond what we normally look at.
there's
right?
There's a way to do it and be like proactive to where you can actually
Right.
impact the front end. But I'm gonna switch over to Rob here just to get some other points in here. But Rob, same thing. Like you're coming at it from the credit side, and you did move up the ranks, right? Like what was the challenges you faced as you're kind of trying to progress in your career?
Kind of the same thing. You have the bottleneck effect, but I think the hardest thing that I see in the industry is lenders want SBA credit people or closers that already have experience. They don't want to train anyone. And I think to find a lender that actually would train individuals into the SBA world is really hard to find. I think banks and financial institutions are willing to pay for experienced people, but to get to that jump, I think is the hardest thing that I face. And it just took time and there's a lot of patience to work through everything. At my last place, what I ended up doing was we would do apprenticeship programs during the summer. So I'd bring in 5 to 7 people and we would just start from the beginning. And these people were mortgage underwriters. Some of them had zero experience in the financial industry world and they were just looking to make a career change. So I would start from the beginning and I had the whole apprenticeship program to train these individuals, knowing that when they were done with that and they had spent a year with us at our institution, it was witching hour and recruiters were going to come get them. So I think that was a hard thing too, was to train everyone and then watch them leave because of what we've been talking about. There's not enough space for everyone. So I think that is really hard too, as you watch your employees leave after you've trained them and built a relationship with them. So to build an institution where you can keep an individual happy for a long period of time, if that's money, if that's title increase, if that's opportunity, we have to have really, really forgetful minds when it comes to who's underneath us or how long they're going to stay with us.
Some of the things that Rob was saying, I'm keep honing in on the training aspect of it, because when I started as a closer, my first week or 6 weeks was sitting in a room with stacks of papers like this, just learning where they go in the folder. And I didn't have my first loan until like 9 months long. And then by about a year and a half, I started feeling comfortable. Moving on from there, being a manager in the spaces and the institutions where they want to have a closer hit the ground running, and they just don't understand that it doesn't work like that. And so if you're not willing to train, you got to spend the money. But I think training is just so important, and that's one of the things that I've done in my career path, is just like, that's always been an aspect of everything I've done. People are going to be shadowing me or I'm going to be training. I like to learn as much as I possibly can, and so I try to get as much experience as I can in other areas and ask the questions and kind of pass that knowledge on to the closers, the new client specialists, that sort of thing.
Well, talk about you're in the room, papers, now everyone's remote sitting at home. And like, how are you training people now, given that, it's through Zoom and whatnot?
I don't know, from the transition from training with paper to training online, I didn't really have to ease into it much, because I could share my screen just as easily through a Zoom meeting as I could, sitting at a desk. And I was pushing for so long to get electronic everything for SBA in our bank. They're like, nope, that doesn't work. And of course, COVID hit. A week later, all of our paper is scanned. We're never having paper again. We're all at home. And for me, it's just been so much easier.
I think the hard part is really just like taking the time to do it. I just feel like everyone's busier than ever for whatever reason. Like, starting from the BDO standpoint, like, I'm looking at everyone's, victory laps for the year end, production numbers from the individual BDOs and whatnot on LinkedIn. They're high. Like, top producers are doing 50 to 100 million now, whereas they used to do 8 to 12. A top producer would be doing 25. Now it's like 50, 70, 80, 100. And it's because they can sit in front of their computer all day and just do back-to-back Zoom meetings without having to drive around. So you can be more productive. And I'm just wondering if like we're starting to like just all try to work essentially be as productive as possible, pack our schedules as much as possible to where there's just no time to sit with somebody for 30 minutes and kind of teach them something new.
So sort of related to the bottleneck and staffing and even training overall, I guess, like the people relations and portion of all of this. Something that I think I'd like to see, and I just don't really know how to make this happen. as sort of a solution for this bottleneck and experienced people that are leaving, even like experienced people that I think are leaving SBA as government employees, it would be great for there to be training. I don't know if it means like a consultant group that's got a bunch of people that know the ins and outs. I don't know if it's like bringing on someone like me that knows the process start to finish. And when you start a group, you train the group up. Um, I agree with both Rob and Molly. Nobody wants to train anymore. I think I'm one of the only people that actually like really loves training people and likes to coach them up.
I have the 3 only ones here in the industry on my podcast.
It's nice to sort of like see your babies leave the nest and grow after whatever it is that you got to develop in them. I'd also like to see sort of like an evolution of the use of this knowledge. Like I'd like to see more people that worked in SBA shops start to transition to broker shops and, business consultant type roles. I think that there's a piece missing in the process as far as the borrower or the operator's experience. Like we're sort of accustomed to just thinking about the loan. We have to just think about the loan and the life of the loan. But if you sort of flip your perspective and you're now a borrower, you get this money and you're operating and everything is great. If you're an operator, you might not necessarily fully understand what a cash conversion cycle is. And as you scale up, what those needs are. And maybe you have a shop that is more of a insurance certificate and financials collector and not really a relationship lender. It would be nice for there to be a reasonably priced consultant type service for these operators to have sort of check-ins like a physician would with your business. Like the whole point of this program isn't just to finance a one-time thing. It's to ensure that these businesses succeed long term.
I get what you're saying. Yeah, and that's kind of people have talked about that for years, I feel like, and it's just like something that it's like, yeah, we should do. That's a good idea, but it doesn't like always like you have to want, it's like they have to want to help themselves, right? And
Right.
But I want to bring it back to like from the SBA, because our audience mostly SBA lenders. This bottleneck problem, I want to fix it right here, right now with you guys, and I think we can. It is usually like a row of underwriters and a credit manager and a chief credit officer. And I've seen that at the last 2 shops I was at. Why are there not more levels somewhere in there? Why are there not underwriters that do these simple deals, underwriters that do complex deals? You know what I'm saying? Like, can we innovate that a little bit?
So I've been at 2 different shops where one has just been like a round robin assignment type of style. And then one where they had these different levels of, they call them different colors of styles or complexity of deals. And I've seen the pros and cons of both. And there's a lot of feelings out there about both, just like I think there's a lot of feelings out there with tying certain underwriters and closers to a certain BDO group, right? And call them pods or groups, whatever you want to call them. And I think it depends on the people that you are working with. With some of my shops where I've been, I've thought, if we split this up into tiers, what kind of confusion is that going to cause with the BDOs, or what kind of confusion is that going to cause with the underwriters? So I think there's a lot of hope out there of like, there's a better way to do this. But as we all know, sometimes a $500,000 loan is way more complicated than a $5 million loan. And how we differentiate that, or creating a matrix of the complexity of this loan, is a good start. And I think that's the hardest thing at the beginning is I'm going to make a decision at the beginning, and then I'm going to get a loan. An underwriter's going to call me and say, hey, did you know about this? And I'm going to say, no, I wasn't given all that information up front. So I think we've talked about this a lot, but how do we train ourselves up front better? How do we wait to get emotionally attached to a deal later in the process? I know that's
nonsense. What are you talking about? As soon as that deal hits my desk, Rob, I'm in love with it, man.
I know you are, right? I've seen it happen. So I think I think that's really hard too, is like anything in the financial industry, like it's anything but analytical. Like everything, like a lot of these things are emotionally driven. Ray and I have worked on a deal where because of the recent hurricanes in the southeast, we had a loan that our chief credit officer was not okay with because we're defaulting on a loan in a similar industry because of the hurricane and flooding and everything. And those are things that just, how do you expect that when upfront I'm like, oh, easy real estate purchase deal shouldn't be that big of an issue. And our chief credit officer has said no to it. And luckily he's been very amenable to our ask, but it's just been more complicated than what we expected when Ray first submitted that deal.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to get off on that tangent right now, but
He has no emotions about that.
Yeah, he has no emotion. She's not emotionally attached to it.
I mean, there's emotions in it. There's actually an interesting place to dive into because it's not emotion. It's like emotions. I don't actually like that phrase. I'm just deciding that right now. Like
Passion.
to me, it's more, what'd you say, Molly?
Passion.
It's passion. And it's also just like, I don't know, maybe it's like relationships in a way, because that ties into it, because like we get these deals from referral sources who, you know, you build relationships with. So to me, I've always been someone who's like, okay, if I tell my broker I can't do a deal when they send it to me, it's fine. I don't care. But if I waste a month of their time and then tell them no, then it ruins the relationship. So I'm not going to let that go as easy. You know, like I'm not embarrassed to say this, but it's a bad look for me, but I'm going to say it. I've literally thought in my head probably 3 times, maybe even more throughout my career, if this deal gets declined, I'm quitting, because I am so emotionally into this deal and we've just spent 2 months on it. And it's like, it feels like the end of my world. I don't even know how to convey this feeling. But to me, when I tell someone I'm going to do something, like, unless something changes, of course, deals change in underwriting and so on. And it's different than how you first saw it. But like my biggest pet peeve is like saying no to something we knew about like 2 months ago, if that makes sense. I don't know. This is my sales perspective. So that's just my perspective in all of this.
I would love to work with any salesperson that has that mentality, because you find more often than not, they're thinking that they're going to find an exception to that. They know about this thing, but we push it along and then somebody's going to come in and say it's okay. We're going to pass it up the ladder. And it never works out well. And it's always a huge customer impact. And I'm always telling them, if you just tell them today that we're probably not closing next week, it's going to be a lot easier for them to swallow than if you tell them on Tuesday, we're not closing on Wednesday. And so you're talking relationship with your brokers. It's the same within the SBA shop too, with the salespeople and the underwriters and the closers and just everybody.
Well, that reminds me of that episode I did on Art of SBA where I asked you, I was going to do this. I probably told this before, so I'm going to just say it quickly, but I was going to do an episode of like 10 tips from like ops closing people to BDOs on how to be better BDOs. And I asked 10 people and then they all gave the same answer. Molly was one of the people I asked, and it was setting realistic expectations up front. Literally every single person said that one thing, so I couldn't make the episode. I just had to just do the whole thing. But yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry, Jane, I cut you off there.
It's similar to that, is setting realistic expectations and even sort of reminders in the way that individuals need to be reminded that everyone needs to do their piece when it's their turn, right? Like an underwriter can't underwrite something that they don't have the financials for. A closer can't perfect the titles if we don't have any kind of vehicle information, right? So I think it's reminding that this is a team effort and we all want to cross the line. Like I know that sometimes it feels like credit and closing or pre-closing or obstacles to the goal, but they want to get there too. I assure everyone we're emotionally involved too. If you want to talk about emotionally involved, walk somebody through a deal that you heard about originating that is now going into liquidation, and hearing their story, about what happens and needing to sort of gently guide them through that process without, humiliating them in any capacity, right? Like, I'm not saying that everyone should default on their loans. Everyone should pay their loans is what I'm saying. But sometimes there are these situations where that's the reality, and to continue working together through that process is important.
Yeah, and that's where stuff gets real, and I would love to do more content on that too, because that's it's barely even talked about, because it's just so depressing. But
Yeah, and I don't think anybody even knows what happens, right? Like you do the loan, you sell the loan, you get your interest and servicing income, and for a long time, default rates were really, really low. I think we're in sort of this new era, or at least an era that hasn't been quite this high of just steadily increasing default rates across the board. I think some are in a worse position than others, but every single shop that I've talked to, it's on the rise. So I think that
it
we've got
is.
to evolve. We have to evolve in the way that we operate, the way that we spend. I think we're at a really interesting time for SBA for sure.
And it's interesting because like what you touched upon, like, yeah, like it's like the different departments interacting within the SBA division, and sometimes it gets a little stressful or a little heated. And, for me, one of the things that I've always, I don't know, it just is not a mantra, but like a best practice that I've sort of clung on to for the last few years as I've, become more of like a sales manager type, is hiring BDOs that don't bring in that like really toxic energy, because it kind of starts there. Like, I would say the majority of the time there is like a conflict type of situation. It's a BDO kind of pushing something that isn't necessarily right, whether it's a deal or a disagreement or whatever. So, for us, and even like going to Fundex, like when we were there, like I feel like everyone was just like super chill, and we were all kind of like,
We really did
friends.
collaborate on everything. I
Credit
think those
closings.
Friday calls were awesome. I think if not for other circumstances, the culture of that shop, the people specifically that really wanted that culture to be true. It's not that we bought into something that we were being sold. Like, fundamentally, this is what we all wanted, and this is the way that we all operated. It was really wonderful. I think that it gave everybody the opportunity to learn from each other and what was out there, because we had everybody on those calls. People understood what the BDOs were seeing out there and questions that they had. And if there was a hard no present, everyone was there to say why and to mitigate why those reasons didn't matter. And I think that being able to recreate that somewhere would be amazing. I think that if there were more shops like that, people would stay. I think, once you're getting fair and equitable pay, and if you're comfortable in that position, you don't have the desire to move on, right? Like, I had a teller that wanted to be teller. She was 50 years old. She said she does not want to be anything other than a teller. And there are some people that are like that, and I think that we need to be able to count on those people, but we need to treat them kindly. We need to help them feel valued in the way that they want to be valued.
Well, I spoke to a recruiter on my podcast like maybe 6 months ago, and I was just asking what are reasons underwriters, are leaving. And one of the common reasons was because the BDOs were jerks. And Rob, I want to go to you with this, because I'm, we won't hire someone who's going to be a jerk. You know what I mean? Like, no matter how much production they have, it's just not worth it, because it like screws up the whole, culture within the shop. So I guess my question for you is, rank all of our BDOs from
Top to bottom.
Toxic to
Should we start-
these
If we start at the bottom, rage room, bottom, where I can go up from there. No, it's actually really interesting. So the last shop I worked at, it's a transactional bank. It's an industrial chartered bank, which is a really attractive charter for people to go after. And for those that don't know what that is, it's really just a bank that does lending. They don't hold deposits or anything like that. And you get into some of these situations where you have these transactional banks that are coming in to support other banks, which is needed because their capital isn't high enough. So you're just looking for these high producers. But I think Jane hit it right on the head. The struggle that I see with transactional based lending ideology is really humiliation comes into a lot of it, right? Because you either have the underwriter or the credit or the closer telling the BDO what they can or cannot do, and a BDO always retorting with, well, at my last shop, and then they go off into their explanation. Or this is just business, so don't get offended by this. And then they go in and they tell you all the reasons why they're wrong. And this happens on both sides, right? Where we try to hide behind these phrases or adages about why something is okay with how we're about to respond. And there's a book that Ray and I both really, really like. Is called Never Split the Difference, which is all about how do you negotiate in a healthier way? How do you both walk away with what you're looking for in a situation? But I think that's the biggest thing when it comes to culture. How do we not humiliate each other, even if we know we're right? How do we build this culture of collaboration? And even here, when I've been working at True Lion, there's a BDO that called me. We were talking about something, and I told him, I don't think we can do that. And he's like, I think we can. And I'm like, okay, let me ask some people to see if we can do it. And matter of fact, like I was wrong. I was like, oh, I've been reading this incorrectly this entire time. Like you are right. We can do this. And it was really great because he's like, yeah, not a big deal. We move on. Well, the next week, the inverse happened. And it was another time where I could say, hey, it's not a big deal. We move on. Both deals got done. So I think that humiliation is just such a big point of emphasis within our own culture that we bring is this is a collaborative organization that we work for, and that there are different roles that we play within this process. And quite frankly, there's a lot of people that don't want to be on the phone like a VDO all day. And they all help fulfill the role of getting a deal done, right? Because at the end of the day, it's about helping the borrowers is really what our focus is, and helping them get something across the finish line.
Well, it's good to say that too, and sort of reiterate that. Otherwise, they turn into deals on my desk or in the pipeline, and you're not attaching them to those people on the other end.
One thing that I would like to see that I try to make happen, if you will, it's nobody's fault. Like if something goes wrong, if there's a mistake, if closing gets pushed a day, there's too many people saying, well, whose fault was it? It wasn't my fault. It was their fault. Well, we're a team. It's everybody on that team had that deal at one point or another. It's your baby. It's our baby. So it's not fault. It's spilled milk. Let's figure out what happened and not do it next time. And when you have things where it goes the opposite, where somebody makes a mistake and then they get called out in front of everybody, and it's demeaning, and it makes you lose trust across the workflow, if you will. Like I don't want this person to work, or I don't want to work with that person. And I've been there. And there's two people that I swear to this day I will not work with. Nope. Yeah.
Wait, that's amazing. I want to just really unpack that, because this is like Madison, we hit record, right? Because this is like the best stuff I've ever heard. I'm just kidding. We're recording. No, but seriously, I was getting goosebumps because you touched on like 2 or 3 things that is the nucleus of everything we're talking, like the center of it all, of that. Just like we're a team, but then you see these frictions occurring within the shop, and it's like such a fine thing, because of course everyone who has an SBA division, they don't want that. They want the shop to have a good culture and for the workplace to be really positive and everyone collaborating. But like then those things happen, and it's like the BDO that says this needs to close on this date. They don't want to hear all the details of why it can't. They just want it to close on that date. Sometimes BDOs have prioritized that closing date, let's just say, over the relationships of everyone else that they work with.
I always say the salesperson wants to close based on hope, and everybody else wants to close based on facts.
Shots fired. Shots fired. Well, look, and by the way, we can't, generalize, obviously. Like there's some salespeople that are better than others. And I think, folks I work with are great. All the folks I worked with in my last shop were great, but I also worked with, a couple of shops ago, some of the divas, we get coined the diva, and stuff like that, and it's very common, but there is a breed of BDOs who I'm very close with, who are smart, and we know we're not successful without all of these other people around us. And so we really bend over backwards to figure out how to really create and maintain and protect those relationships internally, because long term, really hard to be successful if you're going to be like that.
Yeah. Yep.
Honestly, I think that kind of goes back to what really the training thing again and the coaching thing. When you've got a toxic person like that, regardless of what role they are, I've met BDOs that are like that. I've met credit people like that. I've met closing people like that. Like in every role, there are sort of these toxic people. And if you've got good management in place that can really work with their employees one-on-one and help them evolve in their thinking and their collaboration with teams, or their other team members, I think it's possible to coach that toxicity out. But if you can't, for myself, I'm quicker to fire than I am to hire.
Yeah.
Like I don't want that in my shop. The second that gets implanted into your soil, it's gonna grow faster than anything else.
Yep.
And you've got to get that personality out. What is, I think, worse for myself, there are a handful of people, I think everybody's got a handful of people that they absolutely will never work with again. I think the problem is worse exponentially when there's a toxic person in leadership, because now you've got a whole department that is suffering.
Preach.
And I think, when things are working, I think that it's, as long as shops are making money, there's sort of this feeling, if it's not broken, don't fix it, regardless, especially if this toxic person has been there for a long time. But there will be systems or symptoms that take you down eventually. And I think that toxicity either needs to be coached out or managed out.
Such a good point. I mean, the leadership is so key, because I'm thinking back and I'm like, everything trickles down. And I'll shout out Heidi, because she was basically Jesus Christ coming down from the heavens, what an amazing leader she was for us, and obviously that played an impact. And even Kirk, before he left, was everyone loved him, and that all trickled down. But then I've been at shops where the only time you're hearing from leadership is
when you didn't make goals.
Goals, closings, and then all of a sudden the BDOs start hearing that, and they're like, oh, well, it's okay to
be this way.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Any type of behavior like that, if it's sort of you're known for being that person, they've been doing it because they've been rewarded for it, right? You only continue to do stuff if you rewarded for it.
I just was reading a book called What Got You Here Won't Get You There, and it mentioned that in there about, it's what do you call it, a reinforcement of what you're doing that is not actually true. It's just you think that because I've been doing that, I have to keep, that's what's making me successful.
Man, that's another book. I've got 2 books on here. I emotionally involved with a deal. I liked that. I know you don't like that, Ray. I like financing ideas. I like.
All right, I'm gonna take a little a beat here.
We're going to stop it there. Tune in next week to catch the rest of this 2-part episode of the Art of SBA Lending. All right, that's it for this week's episode. If you want more SBA content, you can sign up for our monthly newsletter and check out our sister shows, SBA Today and The BDO Show. We'll leave a link in the show notes. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast so you never miss an episode of the Art of SBA Lending. Ta-ta.